Every year since 1989, the Library of Congress has selected 25 films to add to the National Film Registry. The criteria? The films must be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Each week on You're Missing Out, we take a look at one of these films to try and get to the heart of why they were selected and why they still matter.
This week, Jae Kim returns to the show to discuss the landmark 1977 romantic comedy, Annie Hall.
Our guest today is an actor, a returning guest, and a dear friend. Jae Kim returns to the show, this time to talk about Annie Hall. Jae, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me again. I asked myself, what am I doing here? And you know what? This is a highlight. It's like going back.
Well, that says something really bad about your life, bro. I got to be honest with you. Because this isn't even my highlight. I took 2 shits today, and that was better than this.
Well, there you go. Just like going back to your ex-lover, Said you're going to stop. You know what? I'm here. It'll be better. It'll be better the next time. No, I'm super pumped to be here.
Jae, we're so glad to have you. This is very fun. We obviously, the three of us, go way back. We go so far back, and we have so many kind of memories and such a storied history that we talked for like 35 minutes before we started recording, to the point where our producer Kyle was starting to get fidgety.
Sorry, Kyle.
So we will be discussing Annie Hall today, and we will be trying to the best of our abilities to keep this train on the rails. And I'm excited to do that in part because I'm super interested in why you picked this one, Jae, because you've been on the show 3 times now. This is your 3rd appearance. The first time I came to you and I was like, how do you feel about On the Waterfront? And you were, and you said, oh, hell yeah, I'd love to do that. Brando, I love that acting. I think you and I had talked about Brando back when we were in film school together. And then we brought you back last season and you picked Chaplin City Lights, talked about the affinity that you had for Chaplin, which I kind of remembered you expressing that to some degree. When I sent you over the list this year, I really wasn't sure where you were going to go. And you right away, planted your flag in Annie Hall. So I'm curious, what was it about Annie Hall that drew you to this film as your selection for this season?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. It definitely wasn't because it was the only film I knew on the list. Anyway,
is that true? I don't remember what the list was we sent you. Now, it would be very funny if the list also contained like Psycho, and you were just like, "Oh, yeah."
No, Psycho was definitely taken out.
Psycho was booked last season. That was a Patrick Kottner special. God bless him. But, yeah. What about Annie Hall?
No, Annie Hall. For me, it's an incredibly polarizing film. For me, I've watched it many times, and first time obviously was in film school, where obviously every film student is introduced to it. For me, it's like it works at so many different stages of my life for some reason. Like first time I watched it, loved it because oh my gosh, the techniques were so great. It was so ahead of its time, and the way he uses just the genre and bends it, and then the next time you watch it, I'm like, wow, I kind of hate this movie. Why is anybody with this guy? Like, why would it's just so unbelievable? And then the next time you watch it, I find myself not really having kind of opinion about it, but I just keep finding myself returning to it for some reason. I think there's this energy that, and I don't know, even I think Woody Allen said that he doesn't even understand why people love his film that much, because he says there's clearly other films in my filmography that I think are way better. But I think, I don't know, there's a power to Annie Hall that keeps me returning to it, I guess. And for me, I think there's just the charm of it, I guess, or I just can't put I can't just owe it to one thing, I think. So I think that just speaks to the, to the draw of the film, I guess. So I guess I'm here to kind of dissect that in a way. So yeah.
And so Jae, you mentioned, the first time you saw this was film school. Tom, when was the first time you saw Annie Hall?
Oh, it definitely wasn't film school. It was definitely after film school. Because I think the first Woody Allen movie I saw, gonna double check the timeline on this. Was definitely we were okay. So the first one I saw we were in film school together was Midnight in Paris,
Yeah.
and I thought it was good. And that was the one that kind of finally got me to unlock my film school dickhead like pretension and just like I like this and I don't like that and that's that. I'm not gonna change my mind with Woody Allen. I just decided for some fucking reason I don't like that guy. I'm not gonna watch his movies. The Midnight in Paris unlocked that for me. So, but I probably didn't get to Annie Hall. Oh God, till definitely after college. Probably when I started really being able to collect these stupid fucking movies behind me. And yeah, I mean, I've definitely grown to appreciate the guy a lot more. Not as a filmmaker, but
Tom, this, as we always remind you, these things can be clipped out of context.
I know I'm making
He's innocent.
humor.
He's innocent. Sorry.
Jay, don't.
No, he's saying I'm innocent.
Jay, don't give me more work on Premiere Pro.
He's saying Tom is innocent. But yeah, it gave me it helped open him up to me as a filmmaker and let me get into more of his stuff. Obviously, I haven't seen everything he's done. One, he's made like a movie a year since he started making movies like 50 years ago, and two, roughly 70% of them can be thrown in the trash. But the ones I've seen, for the most part, have been really good. But the interesting thing about my relationship with him as a filmmaker is that I genuinely cannot fucking stand his presence on screen. I actively hate watching him act. It is the most like annoying, like neurotic guy persona thing of just the mumbling and the I just I have to interact with the cast of The Godfather out here, and it's just like, all right, dude, we get it. You're smart and you don't like people, and like, just like let somebody else be your avatar. I'm glad he figured that out down the road of I'll let other people be me, and that way it could be someone charismatic and not like physically repulsive. And I don't just mean that like he's a bad looking guy, just his whole thing just makes me like want to curl up in a ball and just like pray for an electrical fire in my house just to end the misery, because this movie's only like 90 minutes long, and it's just like, oh my God, it's good, and I like what it says about relationships and all of that and blah blah blah, but holy fuck, he's so goddamn annoying.
So
I'm gonna have to unfortunately agree with Tom. Great filmmaker, but I just can't stand him as an actor.
See,
but,
I will say, so my first time seeing this was well before film school. First time I saw it, I was way too young to know what I was watching. So the reason I saw Annie Hall for the first time, it oft evoked the way my mom would just like take me to Blockbuster and kind of go, well, I saw this and it was good. So here you go. So I saw Annie Hall for the first time after seeing the motion picture Ants. As one
Great movie.
does. We saw Ants, and I was just like, I don't know who's this guy? Like everybody seems to like this guy, and I think he's funny. The ant is in therapy. Good stuff. Good bit. Great Stallone, Woody Allen reunion in Ants. So I was like, well, who's this? And so my mom took me to Blockbuster and rented Bananas and Annie Hall. Because she's like, they're both funny. And so I watched both of those. And when I saw it as a kid, I was probably like, 9-10 years old. Bananas killed for me. I thought that was very funny because that's, the early funny Woody movies. And Annie Hall was kind of fine. This is going to shock you guys here, but the subtleties of Annie Hall did not really play with like an 8 or 9 year old. It didn't totally lock in. Like there was stuff I enjoyed, but it was all like the big shtick stuff, right? It was the subtitles gag, it was the Grammy Hall gag, it was the animated sequence with the Queen. But yeah, so that was that, and I came back to it probably in high school when I was a little older. I'd had some relationships under my belt, and I obviously like high school relationships. When you look at them now, not particularly profound, but at the time they feel profound, right? So, here's a fucking 15-year-old kid watching this movie about it's why we do this. We need the eggs, and just be like, hell yeah, brother. About a relationship that I think was mostly founded on, do you want to get together and watch Comedy Central? Not exactly.
Mike was 15 and dealing with his high school relationships, and he's like, all right, I had a breakup and I need a new personality to transmogrify myself into. So I'm just going to become Woody Allen, but with a leather jacket.
What are you talking about? Mike never, ever, ever.
I never expressed any fun. So that's the thing. When I was in college, like Woody Allen, Spike Lee, and Jean-Luc Godard were kind of my holy trinity in film school. Not so much Annie Hall. I adored and still adore Manhattan. That was the one that really hit for me.
Sadly, that's still his best movie. It is his best movie.
I love Manhattan, but that just maybe go back to Annie Hall and all that, and then I dug into his filmography. Even I have not seen every one of his films, partly because, as Tom said, there's a lot of them. There is one out this weekend. He's got a new movie out that's out in theaters this weekend. You don't know that. Nobody knows that, but it's out as we record this.
How's this for a twist? Remember his Amazon show?
I do. Crisis in Six Scenes. Jay, he had a show called Crisis in Six Scenes for Amazon that he hated making, and it starred Miley Cyrus.
Of course it starred Miley Cyrus.
Why
wouldn't it?
Jay, I'm convinced I could just name pairings of actors in his films.
You know who else was in it?
You couldn't tell me which ones were true.
Tory Black.
Really?
No.
I was going to watch it right now.
But like truly, like
I've got other stuff with Tory Black I could show you. It's fine.
He's made so many things with people like you genuinely would not know. He did a movie with Joaquin Phoenix recently.
That is true. Yeah, I do know about that one. Yeah.
He did a Chalamet Selena Gomez two-hander.
Oh right, yeah.
That's kicking around somewhere.
Yeah,
he did an Emma Stone picture.
He's done multiple Emma Stone pictures.
That's
I think she's in the
multiples.
Joaquin one, and she's also in Magic in the Moonlight with Colin Firth.
Colin Firth.
Yeah, there's so many. And who I ask you, who can forget Rifkin's Festival?
Hey, who can forget Melinda and Melinda?
Melinda, here's the thing. Melinda and Melinda is one of the ones that has the idea.
He made a Will Ferrell movie.
The idea is solid. It doesn't a Will Ferrell Chiwetel Ejiofor movie. Let's call it like it is.
So what you're saying is that Woody Allen has a tendency of making half-baked movies because he found a script he wrote in the 60s and decided to just not update it and just shoot it as is?
Hey, he did that with a Larry David movie.
That is
Larry David's in one of them. Whatever Works, it's called. He followed up Vicky Cristina Barcelona with Larry David and Whatever Works. Weird stuff.
Not that movie.
Weird stuff. Anyway, that's all getting off track. But what's interesting about this film, and I think we'll get into this as we discuss it, is the fact that, as I mentioned, like I saw Bananas and Annie Hall basically in the same day, and I didn't know then that Annie Hall was the fulcrum point, where everything before Annie Hall is just like an out-and-out comedy. Everything you need to know about sex, sleeper, love and death. Annie Hall just codifies what we now kind of know as the Woody Allen movie. Like it's all the pieces kind of are there, and then that becomes his thing. I mean, there's variation, there's interiors, there's things like that, but this kind of becomes the format. So I think it's a really interesting thing to dig into this particular film, not just in its place in his filmography, what it does to the romantic comedy, its effect on cinema, its place in the evolution from kind of the hippie to the yuppie. There's a lot going on. But before we get into any of that ourselves and talk further about it, let's hear what the National Film Registry had to say. Here's what the Library of Congress had to say about Annie Hall.
Woody Allen's romantic comedy of the Me Decade follows the up and down relationship of two mismatched New York neurotics. Annie Hall blended the slapstick and fantasy from such earlier Allen films as Sleeper and Bananas with the more autobiographical musings of his stand-up and written comedy, using an array of such movie techniques as talking heads, split screens, and subtitles. Within these gleeful formal experiments and sight gags, Allen and co-writer Marshall Brickman skewered 1970s solipsism, reversing the happy marriage of opposites found in classic screwball comedies. Hailed as Allen's most mature and personal film, Annie Hall beat out Star Wars for Best Picture and also won Oscars for Allen as director and writer, and for Keaton as Best Actress. Audiences enthusiastically responded to Allen's take on contemporary love and turned Keaton's rumpled menswear into a fashion trend.
Well, it's very nice that the registry statement tells us how it did at the Oscars. Now we just have to see, will Tom remember that in about 40 minutes?
No.
Uh,
By the way, who was that on the saying that all that?
that is our social media manager, Amanda. She's
Oh,
yes. I mean, now CJ, now you've given up the illusion that she's here in the studio every week only to read that. Now they'll know it's pre-recorded. You've
what's her
pulled back
name?
the
What's her
curtain.
name? What's her name?
Amanda.
Oh, Amanda. Oh, right. Hey, Amanda. I mean, she's right there. Hey, Amanda.
Great job selling that.
For you on Spotify, she's here, or wherever this is on. Hey, Amanda. How you doing? Sorry, awkward. I'm talking to you, saying your name, and good job. Anyways, continue. Edit that out, please. Anyways,
So Annie Hall, there is this interesting thing with this film, which is no matter who you talk to, even the people who are the most vocal, like I find Woody Allen annoying, or obviously all of the allegations against him, or anything like that. It's the fascinating thing where this movie inarguably occupies a pivotal place in the evolution of the romantic comedy, right? Like there, in most cases, a film genre, I mean, maybe people can draw some parallels in other places, but like in a way that you kind of only ever see in like action or horror, where there's this one movie that comes out and everybody else is trying to ape that after that. In the romantic comedy, you basically, and people can quibble with this, I'm sure, but you basically have It Happened One Night came out in 1934 or so, and everybody is trying to do It Happened One Night or some variation of It Happened One Night until this. And then once Annie Hall comes out, everybody is trying to do Annie Hall until, I mean, pick your particular like Julia Roberts comedy if you want.
Well,
but
When
otherwise,
Harry Met Sally.
Yeah, When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah.
But even, the funny thing is When Harry Met Sally is so deeply indebted to Annie Hall.
yeah.
Like so much of that, including the talking heads bit and all of that. But you're right. I mean, When Harry Met Sally is the next line in that, but it's like, it's remarkable how much this shifts things for this genre.
Because at this point, there's really only two avenues you can take with a romantic movie, comedy or drama. It's either going to be they stay together or they don't stay together. Like it's kind of funny that it took until fucking Woody Allen in 1977 to be like, hey, romances are funny, and also they don't last sometimes, and that's fine. And people were just like, what? We can enjoy a movie where a couple doesn't stay together? What a fucking concept, bro.
Yeah.
Because what? Like the biggest romantic movie of that decade was what? Fucking Love Story, and its whole big fucking marketing ploy was being in love means never having to say you're sorry, which is, but no. So like, it is funny because you're right. It was always just that one thing because Hollywood really only marketed or majored in happy endings. And, it figures it would happen in the 70s that it would take someone to be like, well, no, not every romance ends in a happy ending. But it is surprising that it happens in a movie that is funny and charming and not like, you want to slit your wrist at the end or something.
And there's elements too. I mean, it's obviously there's other films that try and tackle adult relationships after that point. I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting, I think about a lot, is how many of our romance films, whether they comedy or drama, always try and get you right up to the point where the couple gets together or gets married, happily ever after, what have you. And even now, after more than 100 years of cinema, seeing a movie about a couple in a relationship and dealing with those struggles and the ups and downs still feels so rare, right? When Before Midnight
Yeah.
came out, we were all still just like, wow. I mean, to see a couple fighting, it's like, and again, I'm not dismissing Before. I love Before Midnight. I love the whole Before trilogy, but it was this thing of like, right, this feels revelatory in a way that it's weird we don't do this more. We just want to get up to the point where like the people get together so that if you are, if you were raised solely on the movies, you know exactly how to get the guy or get the girl. But then as soon as you get them, you're like, I don't know what part happens now.
Well,
I don't know what we do.
Well, it's funny because Kenny would always talk about this when he was
Kenny
podcasting
Neibart,
regularly.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. Of how there's this like inherent thought that being in a relationship, the active, participation of keeping a relationship alive is not cinematic or enjoyable to watch. That there's an inherent drama to getting into a relationship, getting married, but everything after that's kind of like you have to start throwing in bullshit drama like, oh, is she having an affair with the guy next door, or oh, is he like working too much? It's never just like, no, like they just they work and they come home and they have like their designated nights where they make sure that they spend time together. And sometimes this guy goes and hangs out with the boys on Fridays and she goes and hangs with the girls on Saturdays and Sundays. Family, it's there's that thought of just like, well, it's not very dramatic. And I guess I didn't make a great case that it is dramatic.
I mean, yeah,
but
that's true. Jay, you're, as we record this, about to get married. Are you prepared for your life to become drastically uncinematic?
Oh, for sure.
You've
For
got like
sure.
one more month of being interesting as a movie, and then it's all
That is
I-
true. It's all
I'm
down
like,
from here.
that's why I'm so jealous of him. Not because he's getting married, but because I need my life to stop being interesting. I just need some calm in my life.
My life has always been uninteresting. That's why I'm an
Oh,
actor.
shut up.
That's
Yeah.
not true, and we will get into all of that during your plugs at the end. You've had
This
some
is why
exciting
I'm
things
an
going
actor,
on,
because I
unfortunately.
get to play interesting lives, but I don't know. But I just want to speak on that, on what Tom was saying about this movie being kind of undramatic in a sense. But I think that's what drew me to the film as well. It just felt like these characters existed, within this world, and that to me was as somebody who's an actor, and you're trying to kind of find this grounded, this realism, I guess. And Annie Hall, came out in 1977, I think, and it was so ahead of its time for just. I feel like it almost felt like a documentary watching these two characters just interact, and it didn't feel like anything was rehearsed. And just, I mean, I feel like definitely Woody Allen was playing himself for sure. But that's what felt so revolutionary, I guess, about the film. That's why it's a milestone in the genre, because nothing felt really like fabricated or made up. It just felt like how these characters were. And I think I think that's really what it is. I think that's what really kind of brings people back. Is just, you don't have to overcomplicate and make it dramatic. You just, let's pull back and make it simple. And for it being so, I guess, revolutionary within the genre, it's very simple. If you look at it, it's just about this relationship.
And I would say the key word here, beside more than simple, I think, is intimate. That's the thing that really stands out with this film. I think even more so than anything he does, not just before, but even after. I adore Manhattan. It's my favorite of Woody's films, but that is a much more structured and in a way sort of contrived movie, right? Like, he has something that he wants to say. He has certain ideas he's working with. Annie Hall, I think, by the nature of the fact that its script was So some people, I think, get the wrong idea. I think they mishear the anecdote and think that the movie was found in the editing room. It was more the fact that like the script was edited down from what they had to get to the core of this relationship. But even so, like this was coming from a fresh wound for Woody. He's also just turned 40. You know, he's thinking about his life. He had, you know, he was heavily influenced by 8.5 and the vulnerability there, and it's the same kind of thing. Except what I kind of love about it is Woody has been trying to make 8.5 for most of his career, right? Stardust Memories,
8.5 by way of Bergman, his entire career.
Well, Stardust Memories is like his most explicit 8.5, but he even does an 8.5 homage in Rifkin's Festival. Which
shit, even Radio Days in a way.
Yeah, Radio Days. There's a lot of it. I mean, Purple Rose of Cairo has some elements of that. But in this, I think one of the things that's interesting is it is instead of him trying to do Fellini, he's achieving the same vulnerability Fellini has in 8.5, but instead of it being, you know, how Fellini sees the world with clowns and whipping women in a sauna and what have you, and lots of religious stuff. It's just these little bits of him doing shtick to the camera, you know, stand-up bits, or the flashback to the classroom with all of the kids saying what they do now. You know, I used to be a heroin addict, now I'm a methadone addict. You know,
it's funny too because even with all of that stuff, the movie fits in perfectly with what's going on in 70s American cinema at the time, and that it does just feel like you are watching something that happens. Like Jay said before, it feels like you're watching a documentary because, you know, the cinematography is great. It's Gordon Willis. Obviously, it's going to look great, but there's not like crazy fucking Italian colors or whatever, or like German shadows or whatever. It's just like, here's New York, a brief sojourn into California, but here's New York. And here's two people. And, you know, like that early shot of Alvy and his friend, whatever his name is, like they're walking down the street. It's like, he said Jew? Did you, you know, he said Jew eat? And it's just a static shot of just, it's like a long, like you don't even know where they are in the frame at first until they finally walk down the street and like, oh, okay. So there's shit like that where even with all of the weird, like comedic side tangents and, you know, fantastical elements of him and her like watching their own memories and shit, it somehow never feels like a cartoon, even though there is a literal cartoon interlude in the movie.
Yeah,
it's a weird balance.
Yeah, and I want to actually bring up something that I think our film teacher used to tell us. I remember him saying something very profound to me, and that's it. That after watching a movie, we really just remember the moments within a film. We don't really remember the plot, the story. Really, it's just these very kind of woven together moments, and you remember those moments or sort of set pieces, I guess. And that's kind of what this film is. It feels almost Godard in that sense. Like it's just very broken into these kind of highlights or these moments that this couple goes through, and these very intimate moments. And you know, of course, you know, I'm sure Alan, you know, he ripped off Godard for sure. He shamelessly rips off a lot of great artists, but but that influence carries on to some of the greats of today, like Tarantino, I feel, who makes his films more about these moments. It's not really that the plot that counts. It's just grab these audiences with these strong moments in the film, and I think that's what makes Annie Hall work. You know, you don't really remember. Is there even a story?
I mean, there is and there isn't.
That's the thing, because like you said, there's no big dramatic like hook to it. There's no big like. I mean, you don't even get to the Paul Simon character who she eventually ends up with until there's 30 minutes left in the movie, and that's not even why they break up. It's just, well, here's two people, they're not going to make it. Let's see how they don't make it and why they don't make it. But yeah, I know Woody always says that he can't look at this movie and get why people love it so much because he only sees what it's not. And like Mike said, there was a larger script. They whittled it down to this thing.
There was a murder mystery in it at one point.
It was supposed to be a murder mystery, which they then revived in Manhattan Murder Mystery like 15 years later. And there were other scenes that Woody cut out because he said, all right, this is the movie about their romance, so let's take out a scene where the New York Knicks play 5 famous philosophers. Wish he kept that in. I'm always here for more Nick content. But yeah, so it this almost feels like a perfect example. One of the, like you could put in a letterbox list of that. I think it was Billy Wilder quote that said, "A great movie is 3 good scenes and no bad scenes."
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you get here, because I watched this movie a week or two ago when we were originally supposed to record, and then I watched it again today. And I even found myself remembering things that I'd forgotten already from 2 weeks ago. Of just like, all right, they do this bit. Oh, okay. So it's not like a labyrinth fucking Swiss clock fucking plot movie where you have to remember every little detail. It's just like, oh, live in these moments, kind of like Alvy is living in these moments. So yeah, I don't know.
But I would counter that the
Someone
magic
else talk.
trick. I would counter that the magic trick this movie pulls off is that there are plenty of films, like we acknowledged, that are just a series of moments, right?
Yeah.
But what this does so well is that you never know, much like in a relationship, you never know what little moments are just one-off jokes and what things will actually end up paying off later. The bit of Alvy just wanting to see the sorrow and the pity a number of times, right?
Yeah.
Could just be a one-off gag, just like the Wicked Queen animation is a one-off gag, right? Or the Marshall McLuhan bit's a one-off gag. But instead, it pays off in that very touching ending of, I ran into Annie, she was seeing some guy, and where was she taking him? To see the sorrow and the pity, right?
Yeah.
Or the best part, I think the scene or scenes that wins this movie its Oscars, the lobster scene. Because whatever you think about the rest of this, right? Even, somebody could live a completely different life and look at this and go, I'm tired. I don't want to listen to the champagne problems of rich New Yorkers or whatever. I don't care about the sorrow and the pity. I don't know what mahjong tiles are. They could have every other problem. But every person in a relationship has their lobster scene. A moment that is magical and special because it happens between you two, right? And you just get caught up with the giggles, or you get into a tender moment and you feel good and you feel moved. And if you try to have that moment with somebody else, it's just impossible. And so that lobster scene with him and Annie is so great. But then when they have the next woman in with him and he's trying to rekindle that same thing, and she's just like, I don't get it. I don't know what the problem is. Everybody's been there, We've all at some point wished and believed, like, if I could just, if I could just find somebody else, I'll be able to slip right back into the lobster moment, and you can't. And that's, that in and of itself is one of the tragedies of relationships in the modern age, is knowing that certain things you can only have with one person, and you're not able to have that with just anybody. I think that's, truly those things that just feel like one-off bits pay off, and not all of them. Christopher Walken shows up, and you're like, is he going to matter in the rest of the film? Absolutely not. Doesn't matter at all.
Would have been great if the movie just ended with him crashing into Woody Allen. No, yeah, I get all that shit, and all that is part of the special sauce that makes the movie. Thematically, I get it. I don't like the lobster scene. I find it annoying and cloying. Also, if he's so disgusted at touching the lobsters, why is he immediately putting his hands in his hair? That's just another thing. I'm sorry, but I got to point it out, Woody.
All right, Orson Welles.
Hey,
I find Woody Allen annoying.
I do.
Yeah.
No, I was doing the Orson Welles thing. Orson's little monologue about that everybody likes to quote of, like, he's timid, and timid men make the way. It's like, okay, Orson, I got it, Orson. I understand.
I mean, is he wrong about Woody, though?
I mean, Here's the thing with Orson. It's one of those things where it's like anytime, like Orson Welles in particular. If Orson Welles is gonna get him go, my problem with this person is they are arrogant and they are agitating. It's like, Orson, buddy, let's maybe
Yes, but see, the
take a
great
look
thing
in the
about
mirror.
Orson is that he will admit that about himself and then proceed to drop some of the hottest bars you've ever seen that would make J. Cole melt.
Oh, we're really planting this episode in a specific time.
You goddamn right I am.
There's gonna be no editing of this episode at all.
Oh my goodness.
One clean take.
You know, we talk about this, and it is about the relationship, but I do kind of love that it contains, like, I don't know, Jay and Tom, you guys acknowledge up top, like, oh, this guy, why would somebody want to date this guy? He's so agitating. He said this. I do kind of love that the movie, you know, if you were trimming this more, I could imagine somebody going, cut this opening bit about his childhood because, you know, it's not about the relationship. But I do love that it kind of establishes what an annoying neurotic he is, you know, from the very beginning. I mean, this will not surprise anybody that one of the only scenes that I really resonated me with when I saw this for the first time when I was like 8 or 9 is the Dr. Flicker universe is expanding scene, which I think about all the time. The little kid just going like, well, if the universe is expanding and eventually it's going to come apart and all of life is meaningless, and the only thing the doctor can say is, but Alvy, that's not going to happen for millions of years. So we got to just enjoy ourselves while we're here. Huh?
That was a pretty good
a lot of my
impersonation.
A lot
spot on.
A lot of understanding my psyche and anxieties can be covered by that one scene. Really, that's where a lot of it comes from.
Yeah, you. I wasn't joking before.
Yeah,
this is just your DNA.
Yeah, well,
on film.
Like, I do think that one of those things is like, you know, there is this thing throughout this film, whether it's, you know, the bit about the universe expanding or Woody relying on those old jokes about, you know, the food's terrible in such small portions, or we need the eggs, or anything like that. I do think part of the reason this movie resonates is because, like we're talking about, you know, a lot of the other movies, you know, especially relationship movies, rom-coms, are so dramatic, right? Or the thing that can be so annoying, if a couple breaks up in the second act, it's because, well, she saw him with another woman, but she doesn't know that that other woman is actually his sister. Or he lied about being a rich billionaire and now he has to, or anything like that, right? And nobody really deals with that. But this film kind of does have a lot of moments where either metaphorically or literally, Woody looks into the camera and goes, we've all dealt with this and this sucks, right? Whether it's the universe is expanding or relationship, you know, issues with Annie, or, you know, another one of the great scenes when it's just him going, got this fucking guy talking behind me at the Fellini movie. Can he just shut up? And it's like, it really, you know, there is that thing of like, I'm just going to specifically do what we've all dealt with, you know, and it's not the kind of thing. I mean, you know, there's a strain of it. We mentioned Larry David before with Whatever Works, right? But there is that element, you know, as we record this, Curb Your Enthusiasm just ended. And one of the things that makes that show work is how often it's just a character essentially looking at the camera, you know, to the audience going, you find this irritating when somebody stops to talk with you and you just want to keep walking, right? You also find this annoying, right? We all get this. It's that same kind of thing of like just these little things, you know?
I agree. I mean, whether you like his character or not, you know, it's undeniably like there's a freedom to this movie that you can kind of feel, you know, and you're like, especially in the 70s and, you know, back like, again, I keep saying it's ahead of its time. It really is. Like, people would have never probably would have thought like, you could talk to the camera. Like, you're just gonna insert like an animation here. Oh, that's okay, cool. And okay, this guy's just gonna walk into the frame, and it was just really like, I think it really gave permission to filmmakers after him to like, you don't have to make a film a certain way, or even you don't need to follow the rules of the genre. You know, it just really, you can just go off the rails like Woody did, and really is undeniably Woody Allen. Annie Hall, you know, that is for sure 100%. So that's what I think that's what also really brought me back to the film is because of its power to be so free in the genre, and just be something that's, it's not, you can't really put a label on it in a sense. So yeah, it was refreshing, and it's still refreshing today to see that, and you
Well,
could definitely see the influence that it had on so many other filmmakers.
because so much of it, I think, has, for all of, for coming out and sort of, so much of it has aged remarkably well. Not necessarily in terms of, like, oh, we predicted the future or anything, but because the elements of the relationship that it shows off, the things, the foibles, are still things we all deal with now. I mean, the thing that cracked, Tom texted me when he watched this for the first time and talked about Tom, do you want to talk about the moment the one moment you felt kinship with Alvy in this movie, the one scene that you found
Yeah, the only relatable scene for a guy that is not an Upper West Side New Yorker type is when they flash back to he's at a party with his second wife, and it keeps making jokes, and she goes, why are you so hostile right now? Because I just want to watch the Knicks on TV.
Well, and there's that, but the other one that I could see, listen, I'm not going to speak to your life, Tom, but I could see you resonating with, that cracks me up, and it's extra funny to think about this being a movie in '77, is when when Alvy refuses to have sex with Carol Kane because he's too busy going, it just doesn't make sense. If you look at what the Warren Commission laid out, Alvy, don't worry about the Warren Commission. Oswald couldn't have gotten the shots. It's because the thing about it is, listen, I can only speak to my own life and my own relationship, but my significant other has certainly had to. There was I remember the day that Henry Kissinger died. We were seeing Godzilla -1. I'd gone to the restroom. I hadn't even turned my phone on after the movie ended, and she just looked at me. She goes, "You're going to be very happy. I don't know who this man is, but I know you talk about him a lot." And he's dead. And I'm like, I've become that. Like, it's not the Kennedy assassination for me, but it is like oftentimes I'm just pacing around the apartment going, they shredded Oliver North should not have been able to get away with what he did. I do it all the time.
Every man fantasizes about the Roman Empire. It's fine. We get it.
Yeah.
We're always thinking about Rome.
Every man thinks he can solve the Kennedy assassination. It happens.
Every man thinks he could solve this Kennedy assassination. Every man thinks he could single-handedly win the war for the IRA. LaShawn Al-Gaib is one of my favorite jokes I've seen in a long time. But yeah. No. Like, yeah, shit. Like, yeah. I definitely, we could all relate to that. And
I mean, listen.
I
Tom,
think
you and I worked at the Alamo Draft House. If you don't find something relatable with the Marshall McLuhan scene of the key word here is indulgent. Yeah. Oh God, how could that whole thing of just guy rambling in the lobby?
Oh no, I did that at the bar a few weeks ago. Actually, probably might not even be. It's honestly, again, probably Godzilla -1 around December. I was there, and some guy's like, "Oh, it was so stupid, man. Like, he was like little, and he was just chomping on dudes like a dinosaur. That's fucking stupid, man. That never happened in the franchise before." And I just go, "Have you seen all of them?" And he goes, "No." I'm like, "He plays volleyball with a giant crustacean in one of these movies. What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Okay, that's a fair point." I'm like, "Good. Go back inside and do your drugs and leave me alone."
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I mean, is that there are, even if we don't have all of the same, even if all of the things don't line up exactly, none of us are wearing impeach Reagan buttons right now, but the little things, the energy of it all, right? When the great moment with when Alvy's relationship's not working out for him, so he's walking up to people on the street the same way any of us do, especially if you're in New York and you see happy couples walking by. You want to stop them and ask, like, what are you doing right? And
well, I think it's also the element of Jay, you could probably speak to this because you are getting married. Mike is living with someone and has been with them for a while. So I'm kind of on the Alvy scale of this, but I think the relatable truth that this movie's getting to is that when you break up with someone, it's not because really you did something wrong. And I think that's something that Alvy kind of learns in the movie is he thinks he's self-sabotaging. And maybe he is what he did with Carol Kane. He didn't with the second wife, because if you need to take a Valium every time there's a sound in Manhattan, you're going to overdose. You will become a poster child for right-wing police like laws and stuff. But he didn't. But like he didn't sabotage anything with Annie. Like the thing that I think he gets to at the end, and what we kind of understand is that relationships don't work because you're just not right for each other. Most of the time, like in these kind of cases, if unless you're like beating the woman or like cheating on them, if it's just a case of, well, we just drifted apart, well then it's okay. Well then that's, you guys weren't meant for each other then. And Jay, you probably feel that now of just like, oh right, I've had relationships that didn't work until now because it wasn't the right thing until now.
Or I would counter, in this case, they're the right person for that time.
Yeah, that's also true.
Annie doesn't pursue her singing that way, and Annie doesn't make it to LA without what she had with Alvy, and Alvy doesn't pursue the career that he has. He'd be writing jokes for that hacky comedian, in theory, were it not for Annie. And so I think that there's something,
But
I agree with you, Tom, and I agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying, like,
No,
I think there's
yeah.
also the element of
No.
like being able to look at that relationship, and
we needed it at the time, and
exactly,
it helped both of us grow.
It's not a failure. That's the other.
No, I get that.
This.
I get that too, but I think just because this movie is from Alvy's perspective, I think it's true for both of them. I think it's more true for Annie, and that's what she needed at the moment. But I think when we watched the movie, we kind of realized watching it, they were never gonna last, because the only thing he really got out of being with her is helping her evolve. And once she got to that place, he's telling her to take the adult education courses. Oh, you should pursue the sing. He's basically being a father to her. And once she grows and becomes her own person and is able to tell him no to things and have her own opinions, that's when the relationship is pretty much over. And it takes him a while to figure it out. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't have been together. Like you said, they helped each other grow, but it also means that he didn't really necessarily do anything wrong.
Oh, no.
It's just they weren't going to last because they just weren't meant to be, because they just weren't. They weren't going to mesh after a certain point.
Well, for me,
I don't know.
Looking at Alvy's characters, he's more going through this journey of like, can I just accept myself, essentially?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he's his own worst enemy, obviously, in the whole film. And that's speaking to what you said about relationships, for me, I guess most of the time that is true. I mean, like, there are some times you're not going to work out with somebody, but a lot of times I feel like it is what you're blocking yourself in a sense from like you're kind of I think a lot of times we're our own worst enemies when it comes to relationships, and it's just a human truth, I think, that I see in the film. It's like, and that's part of the growth of it, I guess, in the film, where it wasn't a mistake or a failure that they met and they ended up together at one point in life. It's part of the growth of you, I think, on Alvy's journey, I guess, and in anybody else's relationships that they have, it's part of that process of growth. Like, you learn a lot of things about yourself, and then you get back on the horse again, in a sense. So I don't know. I think for me, I think in the movie, I think Alvy's always doomed. I think he's a very tragic character, and I don't think he's ever going to find. I think the point is that he's never going to find anybody. He's never going to accept himself. I think he's always going to be a pessimist, and I think that's the point of the film. But I guess there are people like that.
It's funny. That's what you're saying, Jay, is my often disagreed with interpretation of Manhattan as well. Is how many people I talk to who are like, well, doesn't that movie gives him a happy ending running to meet up with this 17-year-old? And I'm like, who? Am I the only one that watches that movie and doesn't see him running after this girl and her just going, I'm going to camp. I'm going away to theater school. You know, just have faith in people, I guess. Am I the only one that sees that and is like, I don't think this guy's learned anything this whole movie? But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there's also just the element of, I don't know, how do I put, I like Tom saying about the idea of, sometimes things don't work out, that line at the end that I still think about all the time, that line of, a shark needs to keep moving or it dies. And I think we're dealing with a dead shark, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's, they're both on a journey and kind of recognizing like we've gone as far as we can go together on this one, and we both are going to impact each other in other, in new ways and try and, move forward. I think it's also interesting to think about this in the wake of like when it came out, the registry calls it, the film of the me generation, right? And I do think that there is a profundity to that suggestion of, what we have as a dead shark, because this is a generation, the first generation in a way, that has grown up and decided like I should actually really put effort into figuring out who to spend the rest of my life with. And that if we're not happy, we should break up. Because as we see in the flashbacks to Alvy's parents, people could hate each other and just stay married because that's just what you did. The no-fault divorce doesn't come along until, Reagan's governor of California. People stayed together. You married your high school sweetheart and stayed together. And, Alvy's 40 in this. He's 40 and he's still trying to figure it out, and look, that's obviously people get married all kinds of ages, but like we're all, I think, men in our 30s who are, can't help but look at our parents or especially our grandparents and go like, it seems like they had shit all figured out by like 23. What are we doing? They had houses. What's happening? And I think that what this movie kicks off, and there's certainly other movies before it. We could talk about a Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, things like that. But recently, off mic, me and Tom and Kyle were talking about The Big Chill. And it's so interesting in a way that, like, obviously this movie was a huge success. But this movie is like the MC5 to the punk rock boom of Big Chill and 30-something and all of those, early 80s baby boomers now reflect on getting middle-aged, So, Jay, you keep saying ahead of its time, and that is kind of true because obviously Woody Allen is not your traditional, he's not the traditional baby boomer, right? Or anything like that within that framework. But he kind of presages this sort of neurotic, in therapy baby boomer content that we end up getting so much in the sort of like ordinary people, Big Chill 30-something era, So I think that's super interesting.
Yeah. It's great having that feeling being in your 30s now and just comparing yourself to past generations and being like, cool, great. Wonder when anything is gonna work out for me. In one of my group chats, a friend told us a guy we used to be friends with is having a baby, and I said, "Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna watch The Omen 4 today." Which is just like, well, that's what my 33-year-old ass is doing on a Sunday.
Same
and I'm
here.
just like, don't watch The Omen 4. For the love of God, don't watch The
Very
Omen 4.
excited to watch The Omen 4. Please don't
do it.
I am going to watch
No.
it.
Jay,
You think
are you thinking of the new one? Are you thinking of the first Omen? Because that's not what Tom's talking about, to be clear.
No.
No. I'm talking about a new one.
No, Tom's not talking about the new one. The new one's not
That's
Omen,
not the new one.
to be clear.
Oh,
that is the sixth Omen movie.
Oh my
God. The Omen 4 was a made-for-TV movie in 91 where it's about a demon girl named Delia.
Oh, The Awakening. The Awakening. Okay.
Yeah, terrible. Makes me wish I don't make it to 34.
Now, I will say this because Tom, that's a perfect segue. You referencing a movie nobody's seen is a perfect segue because I do think there's
That's
one.
just my life.
Well, I was going to say there is another line in this movie that I think should be relatable to all of us because we all have the same broken brain issue, and it is a thing that I have almost verbatim had women I was dating say to me numerous times, which is after Alvy does his stand-up set and oh, it's really good. I think I'm starting to get some of the references now too.
Oh God,
like
yeah.
A real bullseye on that one. Of just I jotted it down.
Yeah.
I think I'm starting to get more of
I-
the references too. Just
I swear to God, I had one of those a few weeks ago where one of the girls in the group that I hang out with in Brooklyn, we've been we'd be watching movies a lot, and like there was at one point a few weeks ago we're at this bar and they play horror movies, and I'm just looking at the TV and she goes, "What movie is it?" Because she knows me at this point, and she goes, "What movie is it?" And I go, "Demons." And she just goes, "Oh, it's Italian, isn't it?" And I go, "How did you know?" And she goes, "Just by the way you said it." Just by the way you said the word demons. I was just like, yeah, I guess I get into a certain energy when I'm talking about the Italians. Demons. Demoni.
oh
Yeah. So
fuck.
that is so. Ooh, goddamn.
Here's what I'll say, Tom. I think like I've accepted that this movie is just hitting me 1,000,000%. There's stuff I can't avoid. I mean, when I was watching it to take notes for the podcast, and there's that scene. My partner called me out on this. There's that scene where they're dividing up the books, when they're breaking up, which is a beautiful scene. And then it's oh, this is a denial of death. I bought this for you. I bought you this copy. I'm sitting there. My television's in front of me. I look maybe 30 degrees to my right, and on my bookshelf, spine sticking right out, is a copy of Denial of Death. And I was just like, I had completely forgotten that comes up in this movie. Death in Venice is nearby there too. I'm like, oh, but for me, I've accepted it, Tom. Whereas for you start out stating like the only scene that I find relatable in this movie is the Knicks thing. That's it. And it's like, there's more there. You just don't want to look into that part of the mirror.
No,
you just don't want to. You just don't want to look that in the eye and go, maybe I have ranted about the Kennedy assassination.
Give it a couple more.
No, I definitely have. Mainly, I don't want to look in the mirror because that would require working on yourself. And what's the point of working on yourself when your future entails you just moving into the woods and living under a rock somewhere until like 100 years from now they find your bones and like, what happened here?
Climbing a hill in the snow with your dog, chopping down a tree.
No,
that's next week. That's the next episode. That's next week. We can't talk about that.
Because I'm not coming back and making a bullshit movie out of it.
But beyond that, like, honestly, Tom, you also have to enjoy. I mean, you especially the energy of listen. Harvard makes mistakes. Kissinger taught there. Come on.
Listen, there's some good bits, obviously. He's a New Yorker, so there's some shared shit talking between the New York classes. Some of the blue-collar Italian shit talking can cross over with the Upper West Side Jewish shit talking. But, yeah.
It's also, it is always funny to me when early on, speaking of the Italians, Tom, when Alvy is getting, the bit where he's doing the, hey, Alvy Singer, this is Alvy Singer. And then, Annie shows up and Woody, I guess I think the first time I saw it, I really I sometimes forget to put it together in my head, honestly, when Alvy, does the bit of like, you left me here with these, cast members from The Godfather. And sometimes that joke just passes over me like, right, they're Italian stereotypes. And every once in a while, I do remember to go, right, Diane Keaton's in The Godfather.
Yeah.
He's
also one of those guys is in The Godfather.
Oh yeah.
Is he really? I didn't know that.
One of those guys is an extra in The Godfather.
Is he really?
One of them. I forget which one. I half-assed research here, but yes, apparently one of those guys is an extra in The Godfather. Probably the heavier set guy. I don't know. Who cares? Wow. Life's meaningless.
There's a lot of, as you guys said, there's a lot of references in the movie that are, funny, and there's a lot of haha moments, but there's also slapstick kind of edged kind of a comedy element to it too, anyhow. And obviously the famous cocaine scene where he sneezes into cocaine. I
Oh,
lost my
incredible.
I lost my shit actually when I saw that again. I was like, that's still funny. That is just funny. Like there's no need to understand a deeper meaning of it. It's just funny to watch this guy do things at times. It just be like Woody Allen being physical in anything. Is to me is just it's cringy and it's funny. So that's something that also keeps drawing me back to the film as well. There's a lot of smart references obviously in the film and cultural references, but there's also just an element of just slapstick within that I just enjoy as well.
I mean,
So, yeah.
there's a connective tissue between the film we talked about last time and this time, Jay, because obviously a lot of people cite Annie Hall as like the greatest romantic comedy, but Woody Allen repeatedly says, his favorite romance film, maybe his favorite film, is City Lights.
Ah,
And you mentioned the cocaine scene, or a lot of the humor in this is either stuff that Chaplin would have done. Chaplin does do a cocaine gag in modern times, or stuff that he would have done. Maybe a lot of this stuff feels in line with the obviously Chaplin never did anything like the subtitles gag. But
mhm.
that feels so in line with the kind of humor that Chaplin would have done. I mean, the subtitles gag is the bit with the two of them on the roof, and the
Yeah.
subtitles of their inner thoughts is
Yeah.
such a brilliant conceit. It's
Yeah.
such because again, it is relatable. It is something we've all been through. Um,
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, I think with this film, he can take elements of his stand-up and jokes that work well in his stand-up and do something more interesting with them, right? He could do a bit. This is not, one of his bits per se, but you listen to Woody stand-up, and he would do a bit of, I went to my therapist. He said, how often do you make love? And I would say, almost never 3 times a week. It turns out she's saying, constantly 3 times a week, and that's a fine for a laugh. But the brilliance of doing the split screen, and the how often do you make love? Almost never, maybe like 3 or 4 times a week. Constantly, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. It just hits so much better,
Well, isn't that another thing that I feel like gets lost in the conversation with this movie in terms of its impact, is how it really kind of opened the gates for this whole like, let's get a comedian to just turn their act into like autobiographical movies or TV shows or whatever. Like this, like we mentioned Larry David before. Curb Your Enthusiasm doesn't exist if Annie Hall doesn't
Absolutely.
exist. Seinfeld doesn't exist. Louis, fucking any of the Richard Pryor tried to make one of his own. What's it? The
Jojo
Dancer.
This Is Your Life. Yeah.
Yeah, like this is like a thing. Like stand-ups, obviously weren't like Bill Cosby wasn't until like the Cosby Show. He was just doing roles.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't using his stand-up to inform the shit he was doing off the stage. Like this kind of feels like
Milton
that
Berle,
big moment.
like any of those guys, like George Burns, they weren't really doing that.
Yeah, like Lenny Bruce wasn't doing that shit. Carlin never did that.
I would fucking love to watch whatever a Lenny Bruce autobiographical movie.
I feel like it would. I feel like a Lenny Bruce autobiography would basically just be an episode of like the Joe Rogan podcast.
Lenny Bruce's version of Everybody Loves Raymond. But I will say, with that, the other interesting element of that, we're going to talk about later this season. We're recording an episode on W.C. Fields' The Bank Dick and all of that. There were comedians who became movie stars, right? But what they did is it would be like, okay, this guy's got a shtick, and we're going to build subsequent movies around their shtick.
Yeah.
Right? And they tried to do that with Woody Allen. Take the Money and Run, Bananas, Sleeper, Love and Death. Those are all like, okay, Woody Allen has a particular persona. I mean, he had such a particular persona. There was a Woody Allen comic strip, right? They use him as kind of semi-stunt casting in Casino Royale. The original Casino Royale. Weird fucking movie. But there was the Woody persona. And can we make Woody, can we make this guy, this Woody Allen guy, into what we did with W.C. Fields or Maurice Chevalier or one of those? And this, like you're saying, Tom, this is the real turning point because it becomes, it's something that I listened to. I was recently listening to the Mark Maron episode with Robin Williams, and talking about the concept of joke stealing and all of that, and how it shifts into what Maron called like the comedian as auteur. That the idea of like buying jokes or taking somebody else's jokes didn't exist in maybe the first half of the 20th century. The Catskills comedians would get together and kind of just go, "Are you doing the bit about the mom and the rabbi tonight? No, can I do it? Okay, great." And then it became the comedian as auteur. That happens in Woody's lifetime, and you kind of see that in the movie itself, right? That scene where he's talking to the comedian, right? And the comedian's telling him, like, "Give me a joke like this. Oh, shall he? Give me material like that." And you see him kind of going like, "I'm not gonna do that anymore. Like that's done." And Hollywood and the industry kind of decides that's done. It's the comedian becomes less about the delivery and more about the the mind that's coming up with the humor or coming up with the take.
Yeah, I mean, because comedy changes, it stops being bits, and it starts becoming guys going up on stage and trying to tell real life stories or like real issues and make them funny. Not everybody's doing autobiographical stuff per se, but like, because like George Carlin was never that guy. But he's going on stage talking about real shit and trying to make it funny in his dark, fucked up way. But you got guys like Pryor telling you about his life, Lenny Bruce telling you about his life, Woody Allen pretty much coming up telling you about his life. Comedy changes in that way, and yeah, Woody has his persona, and they tried, but the real magic, which we find out in this movie, is, well, let's let this guy who's clearly got a brain on him and can look at the world in interesting ways and find the fundamental human core to certain issues, and we'll use that as a jumping off point instead of making it the anchor. Yeah. I guess.
No, I agree. And I think, it's the inherent sadness to it. I mean, now the idea of like the sad clown, we do that all the time and we, run it into the ground. But the melancholy, which you don't really get in his stand-up, right?
Yeah.
His stand-up will talk about his ex-wife and it's just funny. It's just like, oh, but in this, it's the melancholy of it. It's the and there's also the element, I think, too, we're talking about comedians. There's also the element too in all of this, which is like talking about changing jokes, exchanging jokes. Part of what happens with Woody Allen, Richard Pryor, is they get to a point where somebody else couldn't do their material. I mean, Lenny Bruce, when he was going through all of his trials, used to make that comment about like, he hated going to court because there'd be some cop up there doing his act and doing it poorly, right? Woody, like, you can take jokes that were made by Will Rogers or Groucho Marx, and I say that with all admiration for Groucho Marx, but like a lot of those you could give to anybody. My grandpa could tell me, one morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas, but how he got in my pajamas I'll never know, and it's just funny. It's just funny, no matter who says it.
Yeah.
But Woody Allen's humor only works when it comes with that kind of pathos, right? That is embedded in him. That. And we can quote it, but who's saying it. That line about I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Or in this film, one of the finest lines: "Don't knock masturbation. It's sex with someone I love."
Yeah.
That's not something you could just give anybody. That's that's that you need his persona and that melancholy that comes with that.
Yeah. You guys mentioned persona, and as an actor, who has had many acting coaches, but I think one of the things that stuck with me that an acting coach said was that the same line that I'm going to give you is not going to be said the same way as another actor is going to say it. So that was something that stuck with me the whole time. Like, you could say the same exact thing and another actor could say it the same exact way, but it's just going to read differently because you guys are just different people. And undeniably, that's Woody in the film. His persona, love him or hate him, there's nobody else that can deliver what he delivers, the jokes that he delivers, the quips that he delivers, the things that he says. You could give those same lines to somebody else, it's going to be a different movie. And so that's what makes it undeniably, as I said before, Woody. So his persona is kind of unmatched.
And I think the thing about his persona too, and how it works. One thing I always think about, and I'm going to use this to transition us into talking about the other lead of this film, which I think, we haven't touched on Keaton much because it's kind of like, I think, to me anyway, like to talk about this performance, especially as talk about her presence in this film, you kind of just need to clear the table and go, we need to get into this because it's so much. But I think all the time about, she was on the Daily Show when Jon Stewart hosted. And she was promoting something. I don't remember what it was. And Jon Stewart, I remember, confronts her and he goes, listen, I need you to understand one thing, Diane. When I was a young man, you were the most beautiful woman in the world. And you were dating Woody Allen. And a little nebbishy Jew like me looked at that and went, I have a chance with the most beautiful woman in the world. Maybe the universe is changing. And then you break up with Woody Allen and you get with Warren Beatty. And I go, oh no, the world works exactly how I thought. Beautiful people get together. The two most beautiful people in the world are together. There's no chance for a boy like me. So, and I think before he even finishes the sentence, she goes, I think both of them are equally charming and sexy. And Jon Stewart, I believe, like pounded the table and just went, no, fucking, what are you talking about? He just couldn't. He's like, no, I think Woody and Warren were both equally charming and sexy. And he's just like, no. He couldn't fathom it. But, there is so
Yeah.
I think about it constantly, just how mad Stewart got at that. Obviously, like, we focused a lot on the Woody Allen of it because he is the writer, the director, the star. And of course, there are other people we can talk about, from Christopher Walken to a surprised Jeff Goldblum to a barely seen Sigourney Weaver, Shelley Duvall, Carol Kane. But this has all been building up to what really needs to be talked about with this movie, the real absolute revelatory thing, the woman whose fashion and persona and energy
Yes.
shapes contemporary America for like a decade, which is Diane Keaton. Everything from her fashion sense to the la-di-da to all of that just becomes kind of, the proto, what Carrie Bradshaw was to a generation, Annie Hall was to a generation before that. Just everything shifts around this character, and what a performance.
I just want to say thank God that she's in the film, because it would have been unwatchable if she wasn't.
I mean, yeah. Then it would have just been Woody Allen walking around talking to no one. Jay, that would have been a terrible.
Ironically, though, Woody was saying that I think it wanted to be less of the relationship between him and Diane Keaton,
Yes.
which is more him, I think. And
Yeah.
then obviously everyone was like, "No, let's keep you and Diane within it, obviously, as much as we can."
Well, jumping off of what Jay's saying is like, yeah, if you got somebody not as good as her, the movie is kind of gonna be a lot more annoying, because you need to have someone who's, one, charming and charismatic, but you also got to believe that she would tolerate this annoying little bastard for as long as she does. And it's because the character is essentially a moron.
I don't.
And I'm not no, and I'm not, and this is the point I'm trying to, not being a jerk, but that's like kind of his whole thing, is he finds her as this unmolded lump of clay, and he helps her evolve. And you need to, if in lesser hands she would just be a moron, she would be like a dumb blonde caricature, but by having her, giving her all these dimensions and the la-di-da, the fashion, all of that, she's not a moron. She's just still she's someone that's still just figuring her life out. She's young.
Okay, so to clarify what you mean, I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying, so it's not, you're not saying the character as she appears in the film is a moron. You're saying other hands,
I mean,
in lesser hands.
In other
gotcha.
No,
Okay,
in lesser hands, because
myself.
like that's her arc, is she evolves with his help of like, no, you can learn more, you can do this, you could be that, blah blah blah. She's, in lesser hands, she would be an obnoxious caricature cartoon, and one, you would either not believe that she would stay with this guy for so long, or you would just be kind of like, I mean, he's kind of preying on a moron here, so like, what do we even, like, how can we even sympathize with this guy? Even if you're not supposed to 100% sympathize with him, he kind of then would tilt into an even more like unlikable sphere. So she shockingly enough, as the titular character, she is a very important part of this movie, even though like it is from Alvy's point of view the whole time.
Yeah, her character is just really open minded, and obviously, as opposed to Alvy's character being so tunnel visioned and so close minded. But I think that was his, like, that also made Alvy realize that, oh, I can't go there. I can't go where she's going. I can't do what she's doing because that's just who I am. And I think even though she accepted him, she was much more willing to, you know, explore way more than he was ever, ever willing to. So, yeah, it was an important character for him in his growth in his life. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think with that, sure, she goes to California and he's not happy in California, but I think it's also the element of when he starts the movie, he's pretty stuck in his ways too. They both are. She's very flighty, very, when we first meet her and she's doing all of her bit of, do you have a car? No, I don't. Oh, that's okay. I have a car. Well, why'd you ask me if I had a car? Oh, are you going uptown or downtown? Downtown. Oh, I'm going up. But I could go to, that whole bit. She's very flighty. She's obviously a child of privilege, all of that. She wants this singing career, or she wants education, but she doesn't pursue it, right? And he spends the whole movie being able to very obviously look at her life and kind of be like, well, why aren't you doing X, Y, or Z, right? The same way any of us, when we look at our significant other, can kind of go like, you've got this problem. Why don't you do A, B, or C to fix it, right? And then, but we can't do that for ourselves, right? We think our problems are so insurmountable. And Alvy, even though it's not, he doesn't move to LA, right? He does decide, I'm going to stop writing jokes for hack comedians, right? I'm going to write a play. Now, he admits the play is not very good. It's his first play, but he's writing a play. He's pursuing those things too. He's kind of, because I think this is also a movie about turning 40. This is a movie about feeling like you have gotten stuck in your ways and settled, and realizing he can still change. He can still do something. I think in a way, like, and I'm sure people can find other examples in film history, but I think the both blessing and curse of Annie Hall is that this also plants the seeds for decades of the manic pixie dream girl, which is, I'm not saying Annie Hall is that. I am saying lesser writers, and I don't mean just like, but like, I mean, what Annie Hall is, Charlie Kaufman does with Clementine in Eternal Sunshine, and then from there, cinema is just broken for 10 years. And every quirky, cute actress just has to play this role. But what I love about Annie Hall especially is that that's just Diane Keaton. She creates that character as much as Woody Allen does on the page. She gives that its energy and its vitality. And even though we've had decades of manic pixie dream girls, nobody has ever quite felt like Annie since.
Yeah. I mean, I think A.O. Scott put it brilliantly. He said the movie was pretty much a love letter to Diane Keaton.
Yeah.
Just how wonderful she is as a human being, and the chemistry that she creates with Woody Allen, is just very unique. I mean, obviously he's kept working with her since, and yeah, it really is like lightning in a bottle for me. Just watching them two on screen, like really nobody can replicate that, I feel. And people have tried. People have tried to also be Annie Hall, but there's only one and only.
Yep.
So, yeah.
It's just, I mean, it really is one of those things. It's not thinking of like, we did Star Wars on our first season, and you watch Star Wars and you can't help but kind of go like, Star Wars, it's so totemic, it's so Titanic. You're like, how did this not just sweep the Oscars? How did it get beat up by such a small movie like Annie Hall? And then the credits roll on Annie Hall and you go, I get it. I get it. I get it. Yep. I get it. I get it.
And we haven't even talked about the editing of this movie.
Yes.
Like
absolutely.
it's very landmark in that respect because it's fluid. it's a fluid editing style where it's jumping between timelines with like within scenes too, where you kind of have to figure out where you are in their relationship, because it starts out with him. The whole movie is basically him telling you the story of the relationship, but it keeps going from meeting to the breaking up to like in between and everything. So you kind of just like, all right, you kind of have to figure out where you are and all of that. And it's never annoying. It's never confusing. It enhances the experience, makes it feel like you're thinking about a relationship you were in at one point and how those memories just flood back, and they're not cohesive or there's no continuity to your memories. They kind of just come and go. And pretty good for a simple little romantic comedy by one of those boys. What show did him and Mel Brooks and the Sid Caesar show?
Caesar show, yeah, of course.
Yeah, just one of those boys from the Sid Caesar show. He did pretty good for himself.
I also want to point out, as we start to build around, we'll talk about like favorite scenes and favorite moments here and there, but sometimes I try and talk about on this show when it comes to particularly like bad shit, sexual impropriety, all of that in like the 70s, 80s in Hollywood. I often try and evoke, I brought it up on Chinatown, how much of a different time it was just culturally. Doesn't mean that any of this shit was okay. Just how much more permissive we were then, because skip ahead to Manhattan. At least in Manhattan, people are remarking like, you're dating a high schooler. That's a little weird. There's a throwaway line Tony Roberts has in this.
Yes.
Twins.
Okay. I caught that too.
Twins, Max. 16 years old. And you do have to sit back with that scene and go, oh, everybody was
just a creep.
Way more permissive.
I had to rewind that, actually.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
Did he just say that?
Yep. Again, like it's a thing that we don't talk about enough with this stuff, is like the weird pendulum swing where like the 40s, 50s, whatever was so like sexually repressive, and then like you swing it to the 60s, and by the time you hit the 70s, there's just like a lot of so-called enlightened liberal people going like, I mean, children are just little adults, man.
Oh my
like,
God.
And then it just like the 80s swing right in and go, the fuck not, no.
See,
no.
because when I rewatched it a few weeks ago, I immediately texted Mike going, I thought this was going to be one of those movies where we don't have to talk about the Woody Allen controversy, because there's nothing untoward in this movie about regards relationships and sexuality and whatnot. And within 5 minutes, we got a scene of little Alvy forcibly kissing a girl that does not want to be kissed, and I'm just like, you got to be fucking kidding me, man.
But again, like there's
then that scene, the 16-year-old scene, I was like, what the fuck?
Well, it's like, but I remember when the HBO miniseries Allen versus Farrow came out, and I can, we're not getting into that today.
Please
no. But when that came out, I remember like one of the things people were pointing out is like, well, look at this old short story Woody Allen wrote in like 1972 that talks about like wanting to hook up with like blonde 18-year-olds. And I'm like, man, if you think that's an indictment, I defy you to read anything written by anyone in the 1970s. I'm not saying it's okay in a moral standpoint. What I am saying is you need to understand that is just how people talked then. That is just, we have to understand how much that was like a part of how all of pop culture was just enabling in that decade. You know what I mean? They call it the me decade, and it really is like that entire culture existed to kind of just go, hey, whatever you want to do, fine.
Well, there's a reason consequences. Why. There's a reason why, like you said, there's a pendulum swing, and why the 80s became so fucking conservative and all of that shit. It's because we did get so fucking permissive, and it's a thing that he doesn't get into in this movie because his section of New York was safe. But New York was a hellhole because we kind of just threw up our hands and said, okay, I guess we're just, we don't care anymore, until, the pendulum swung back and people figured, oh, we can make money off of this, so we have to sweep all this in up to Harlem and forget, and the Bronx, and just forget all of this shit. But we were very, very, very weirdly, uncomfortably fucking permissive for a long time, and Yeah.
It's
Like, films like
Everything's bad.
it's a
the
weird
Taxi
time.
Driver. Taxi Driver came out in 1970s as well, so
Yes,
that
yeah.
even
They're literally
well,
just
that-
like opposite.
Yeah,
angles
but like at least like Taxi Driver's like, oh, look at this psychopath who's about to slaughter a lot of innocent people. He's got a weird obsession with the 15-year-old because, well, when he takes a grown-up out on a date, he takes her to a porn. So this is
Tom, what do
this
you
is a man that is not
Tom,
healthy.
Whoa! Lots of couples go to see this. Lots of couples go see this.
Lots of couples go to see.
That's
And-
like 2 seasons.
I-
from now. We're gonna get.
I will say this movie is missing a scene of Woody Allen threatening to beat up Albert Brooks with some kung fu moves. What a scene in Taxi
okay.
Driver.
I want to kind of wind us down in some of like just a round robin of like just moments that we love, because we talk about this is a movie of moments. I think the two that hit me, one that I love from a filmmaking standpoint, and one that I just love from a writing standpoint. Setting aside the fact that I did tear up watching this again. Her singing Seems Like Old Times does hit like a son of a bitch. But from a filmmaking standpoint, it's the breakup. It's when they're packing up the books. And it's just a stationary camera and them walking in and out of the frame. It really... Now you would just put coverage, right? But just them walking in and out with the books, it makes it feel sadder. It's such a clever thing, and people don't talk about, I remember even when, not to bring it up, but when we were in film school, the amount of times like we would talk about like, oh, let's have a long take here or something. You get people going like, no, you should have coverage. You should cut a lot more often. You should do this. And it's like, well, look at how effective that is. Sometimes it can be really effective to just have you sit in a moment. And this film does that really well.
Well, it makes you feel like a spectator in the moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need coverage and the scene demands coverage, but sometimes just sit in the awkward not silence, but just the awkward situation you find yourself in. And that's kind of the crazy thing is that like we give him a lot of shit now for just being like incredibly lazy as a filmmaker, but he was bold at a time. Like he would make choices that were thematically smart for the moment and were interesting and were bold and game changing. And this movie has a lot of those.
Yeah, I think I'm going to nerd off here for a second, but I think it was like 14.5 seconds, the length of the shot in his films compared to like other films of that in that decade. Even like they're like way shorter, obviously the length of the shots. So it's just a testament to his boldness. Obviously, what was it? Gordon Willis?
Gordon Willis,
Gordon Willis, yeah, the supposed Prince of Darkness. Sorry.
No. I was going to say,
it was just very, very interesting to see Gordon Willis and Woody Allen collaborate on such a meditative shot kind of list, I guess, that we could just kind of ponder upon it and just kind of, it's a slice of life. It's a slice of life. There's nothing intense about it. Let's just place the camera here because this is the best way to capture their interaction and leave it here. And I think there's a boldness to that for sure. Yeah.
And the other thing, writing wise that I highlight that I do think of a lot, I think, the aftermath of a breakup or relationship trouble, and you see a happy couple, because you have that great moment, when it's Alvy and Annie and they're imagining where people are going and what they're doing, you're like, oh, that's very sweet. But when Alvy's on his own, he's imagining like walking up to this couple and going, well, how do you two make it work? And how do you two make it work? I'm very shallow and empty, and I have no ideas and nothing interesting to say. And I'm exactly the same way. Brilliant. Great bit. A flawless bit. We
use a large vibrating egg.
Tom, I knew that was your guy. A large vibrating egg.
Well, that's what I get for asking a psychopath.
Yeah, ask a psychopath. What do you think? It's so good. That and the only other thing, I guess I'll say two more. I will also note a little fun fact, a little trivia that I picked up before I hand over the floor a bit. The Fellini film that they are talking about, if you do the math, the Fellini film that the guy is complaining about, right? I thought it was is Casanova, his movie he made with Donald Sutherland. And so, unfortunately, once you know that, you kind of have to agree with the guy a little bit because that movie is a mess. Also worth noting, Woody Allen did not grow up under the roller coaster at Coney Island. I know this because I found the place he grew up, and it's it's like a 15-minute walk from my apartment, which is nowhere near the roller coaster at Coney Island. So I just want to stress that he did not, his birthplace.
Because that was a hotel.
Yeah.
That was the real place. It was a hotel.
I just found out he grew up near there, and it's like, oh, that's weird. Other than that, just want to stress, Sex with You is really a Kafkaesque experience. Phenomenal line delivery. Great shit. Love it. Let me pass it over. Tom, highlights, spotlights, anything you want to touch on, any moments that make you chuckle?
The New York Knicks bit, the vibrating egg bit, talking about like the setup and payoff that you don't even realize the setup is payoff is him saying, "Oh, I can't drive because I have a lot of hostility," and then when he's in California and he's driving, and he just keeps smashing into cars, and then the cop shows up, and then he's just, "Oh, I've got a lot of hostility towards authority," as he rips up his driver's license.
Extremely
and don't take it personally. Which also just makes me remember, like, oh yeah, remember when there was a time where a driver's license was just a piece of paper with your name on it, and the cops just had to kind of like hope that this was yours? like that's the thing that I love always, just with things in the past, of just like, remember when it was easy to commit crimes? Like, that's like, I could just have a license that's just like, are you so and so? Yeah. Well, I can't prove otherwise, so here you go.
Jay?
For me, there has to be 3, actually. So for most of this film, I chuckled. I just laughed there. There's 2 times I lost my shit, and that is obviously the cocaine scene where he sneezes into cocaine. Second scene I lost my shit, Christopher Walken scene. I did not never remember laughing that hard, actually. I just... First of all, I forgot that he was in the movie, but... Oh my gosh, the way he delivered that story and Woody Allen's response to that was just hilarious. And obviously seeing Woody's reaction when he's driving, that's all ties into the joke as well. It's so funny.
Also the fact that his name is Dwayne.
All right, Dwayne, I'm due back on the planet Earth now. Excellent.
It's brilliant.
Oh, and then in a similar scene, the Grammy Hall, what Grammy Hall would call a real Jew. And then the grandma staring at him, and it cuts back, and he's got the curls in the hat.
He's got the Hasid get up on.
I mean, there's so many different styles of comedy within this, obviously, but I lost much. But that Christopher Walken scene is brilliant, and the cocaine scene. But again, I think one of the things that also brings me back to this film is the honesty of it. And one of the most honest scenes in that film is I think the first scene I ever watched before I even watched the movie is. In film school, I think they showed. I think our teacher, Lisa Robinson, bless her soul,
still alive. I need to stress. This is
She's
still first alive. Time on my second time today you've done that about living people.
I was gonna be like, shit. Did I just get some breaking news?
Still,
she's alive and well. Alive and well and directing episodes of network television. Excellent. Okay, she's doing very well. Hope to work. Yes. Yeah, she is. I think she was on like Blacklist or something. Anyways,
Jay, what was the scene that you watched?
Yeah. The spider scene. The spider scene when Alfie is called back to a department because Annie saw a spider in the bathroom and she's just raving on about the spider. Kill the spider. It's a spider. It's a spider. And obviously, it's not about the spider. It's really not about the spider. But that, not even from like just a filmmaking standpoint, but just you talk about the lobster scene. I say the spider scene. Like I think a lot of couples go through that kind of the spider scene even in their relationship, where it's obviously not about the thing. It's not about the sink. It's not about the clean up the clothes or the laundry. It's not about. There's always something underlying there. They either feel something missing and they feel lonely, or there's something, there's something deeper, obviously, that's being said, and that's the subtext, obviously. And that is such a brilliant scene to me. I mean, and that's the scene that made me want to watch the whole movie. And that's the first. And I didn't need more after that scene. I was like, all right, I'm sold.
But what's also great about that scene is that it is also just about the spider.
It is really
It's like,
exactly.
you call me for the spider? Just give me something. He walks in. Okay, that's actually this thing's huge. I need something else. The thing's the size. There's two of them. You got spiders the size of Buicks in your bathroom. He just walks in all confident. Is like, okay, no, that's a big fucking spider. That's a good bit. It's a good bit. Gotta say, good bit.
Now,
I feel like that scene really sums up the movie really well. Just what it's about, essentially.
now
yeah.
we are gonna wind down talking about the Oscars, but before we do that, Tom, I just want to acknowledge, because you've done it several times on this episode, your Woody Allen impression is not a great impression of Woody Allen. It is, however, a spot-on dead to rights impression of Mort Goldman from Family Guy. And it has to be commented on. It's unsettlingly accurate to that. Like, you think you're trying to do Woody Allen, but every time it's just, oh, Peter.
Oh, God.
It really is unsettling.
All right.
This is like how you can always be on pitch when it's Dawkins Dream Warriors and only that song.
I still haven't done that at karaoke, though.
Like,
I'm sorry, my favorite Tom Lorenzo impression will always be Ruben Östlund.
Well, thank you for that callback.
That'll always be my favorite Tom Lorenzo impression.
I've
never seen an interview with Ruben Östlund. I'm never going to see it.
Neither have I.
I don't need to. I know what he sounds like because Tom Lorenzo has fucking impersonation.
I've never heard that man speak. I don't know where that came from. It came from like the depths of hell. Like one of the elder gods was speaking through me.
Jay,
I don't know what the fuck that was.
I cannot express to you how sad Tom was. You know how sometimes, like, I don't know, when they have like a police dog and they're like, you know, it's trained and it's ready to like go out and chomp on something, and then it's like, no, you're just going out for a run in the field. There's nothing for you to attack. That was Tom when the Oscar nominations came out this year and he didn't hate any of them. You could just feel that he was like, I was so ready to tear. And it's like, I think these are all varying degrees of fine. I felt bad.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for like a Saltburn nomination, but we didn't get it. So I was just like, oh, I guess I can't be a nasty little bitch on this episode.
Speaking of the Academy Awards.
Well, before we get to the Academy Awards, I just one point that I want to make that kind of I feel like ties the whole episode together, which is the great writing on display, which is their initial meeting, and not just the in the tennis court, in the tennis scene, but when they get to the apartment, and they're having wine, and like you said, the subtitles bit. That whole scene sets up everything that's going to take them down in the end.
Yeah.
His you should take adult education classes, you should learn more, you should sing, blah blah this, all that. Her kind of like not being all that into his, like, kind of tolerating his pretentious bullshit, which you just know, like, these two things are just going to explode at the end of the line. And that's good writing, folks. Very good writing. Not as good as anything Ruben Östlund has done.
No,
but,
not as good as anything Ruben Östlund has ever written.
But then again, Woody Allen wasn't trying to take down society. So
here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I'm going to say. I watched Rifkin's Festival. It's not very good. It's extremely lazy. On par with Triangle of Sadness. Same energy is all I'm going to say.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Right? Yeah.
Oscar time.
All right, Tom. With that in mind, how do you think Annie Hall did at the Academy Awards that year?
Oh, well, I think it was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, and Screenplay, and I think it won Director, Picture, Actress, and Screenplay.
That is correct. Now, what I would love to see, and I know you're going to say no, Tom, can you tell me any of the other Best Picture nominees, and can you tell me who, you are correct, in all of those, can you tell me who beat Woody Allen for Best Actor?
No.
Okay. So the other nominees for Best Picture that year, The Goodbye Girl, Julia, Star Wars, and The Turning Point, was nominated for Best Director, which it won. It obviously, as we mentioned, won Best Picture. Was nominated for Best Actor for Woody Allen, who lost to Richard Dreyfuss for The Goodbye Girl. So,
of course,
a different neurotic New Yorker performance.
The movie that had at the Oscars, Jack Nicholson walk up to Richard Dreyfuss and say, "Bet you're glad I didn't do anything this year, huh?"
Obviously, Diane Keaton won Best Actress, and it did win Best Original Screenplay. Woody did not attend the Oscars. He would never attend the Oscars anytime he's won. The only time he appeared at the Academy Awards was after 9/11, which I do think is part of what endeared me to him at a young age, too, because that was, it has to be said, if you were watching the Oscars that year, an incredibly profound moment when Woody Allen came out. And have you guys seen that? Do you guys? I don't know if you guys are watching that.
I loved his 2002 Oscars
Yes.
appearance. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, his bit was so great.
Coming out and just listing all of the other New York filmmakers they could have gotten.
Yeah.
They called Spike Lee. He was busy. It's great stuff. Jay, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, buddy.
Annie Hall, thank you for coming back on the show. We will absolutely have you back again because it's always a good time. There's some
Damn
stuff.
it! You're gonna ask me back again.
There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff next season. I may talk to you about that before we even wrap up this season because there's something there I think it would be fun. But before we do any of that, please plug away. Tell people where to find you, what you've been working on, because if you don't, I will, because you had something really cool happen recently, and if you don't talk about it, I will for you, you son of a gun.
Well, okay, I'll save for last, but yeah, of course. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me on the show. But yeah, a couple films that I'm in actually are on a festival circuit. A film called Panacea, which is a horror film, which I still want to show you guys. Actually, it just won Best Audience Award at the Gasparilla International Film Festival. I just found that out last week.
Very cool.
And, that's a festival in Florida that John Travolta was at. So that's pretty cool. I think he was showing his recent film. I don't know what film that he was in, but anyways, it was cool to be in the same theater as his film. So, but yeah, it was that's a huge honor. And it's looking to go into feature film development. It's going to be an all Asian American horror film. Horror films are in these days. They've always been in their money. So. But it's really a genre that I want to explore more. So yeah, check it out, Panacea. And also a film that I just finished called Tenancy. It's a short sci-fi film in the vein of kind of Black Mirror. That's going to be released in the festival circuit later this year. So look out for that. Follow me on Instagram for any updates on that. Have a great Jay. Have a great Jay is my Instagram tag. Ha 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 ha. Anyways. And yeah, as Mike is telling me to build up to the most recent thing that I've been in, which is if you go to pornhub.com. No, I'm kidding. It's
and you type in Tory Black.
I was very, very lucky to be a part of a music video with Yandel and Manuel Turizo. They are pretty big in the Latin music community. Their recent song Mama Sota, I was cast as the main villain. That was very cool to be a part of. It made it onto the Jimmy Fallon show. I made it onto the album cover, which was pretty cool to see that. And fun note, I think the director said he wanted to replicate the style of Old Boy, and he said that, hey, you kind of look like the guy from Old Boy. Let's cast you. I mean, I auditioned for it, and it was very cool. The cast was the Yandel and Teresa were incredibly welcoming. Very cool, and it's nice to get random DMs from random Latino women. But that's besides the point.
When that video came out, I hope you know, not only did I watch it on our TV here at the apartment, I texted that to everyone that I knew that had interacted with you in any way. And when I say everyone, Jay, I've been saving this till we were on mic. That includes my family. And so I didn't say it until now, but my mother wanted me to tell you weeks ago when I said her this, wanted me to tell you she is very proud of all that you've done and what you've done here.
Oh.
So just know that. That's a real thing. She's very proud of what you have achieved. So good on you, Jay. Jay, we're so glad, and I cannot wait. We're going to have you back on again. I can't wait to hear what music videos you're the villain in by the next time that you are here. Truly, can't wait. We're so glad you were here. Everybody else, though, stick around. We'll be right back with our picks for the National Film Registry.
The National Film Registry isn't some fixed object, frozen in time. It's always growing, adding new titles every year. These annual selections are made by the National Film Preservation Board, with members like Martin Scorsese, Alfre Woodard, and Leonard Maltin, and representatives from organizations like the Academy, the DGA, and the AFI coming together to debate and decide. But they don't just pull titles out of thin air. They pull from the public, people like you and us, who can submit their nominations for the registry in a form on the Library of Congress's website. What we do, at the end of each episode, is have Mike and Tom pick films not yet in the registry that they feel should be, inspired by that day's topic. At the end of each season, those films will be formally submitted to the National Film Registry for consideration, on behalf of You're Missing Out. Here are today's picks.
Okay, so mine's going to be very simple. I'm not going to do my usual Tom preamble bullshit. Romantic comedy that I think is probably the best of the last, 20 years at this point. Incredibly funny. It's very melancholy. Has a happier ending than Annie Hall, but still has the same elements of looking at a past relationship and seeing that maybe it wasn't all cracked up to be, and being able to move forward and all that fun stuff. It's incredibly funny. One of the best of its period. Holds up incredibly well today. I'm putting in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. One of the great comedies of the 21st century. One of those great in that period of like the Apatow comedy renaissance thing where it seems like every year they were putting out just classic fucking comedies, and then it peaked at This Is the End, and then we haven't had a good comedy since. I think it's a great movie. Definitely a lot goofier and more sophomoric than Woody's, with the Dracula musical and Jason Segel's just floppy dick. But I think it's great. I think it's an honest, heartwarming, melancholy, all that fun stuff movie. So yeah, if you're tracking the course of cinema history with this stuff and what's important and what's not, and tracking, patterns and all that stuff, if this is the last great romantic comedy, and it's one of the great comedies of that era where comedies kind of ended, it has to be in there. So yeah, Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
So for me, sitting with this, obviously, I have nominated a number of Woody Allen films to the registry already, and there are plenty more one could. Obviously, a significant filmmaker who made some of the best films of their era. But in this case, we alluded to in the episode, the focus is on Diane Keaton in this film, and I think the focus should be on Diane Keaton beyond that. We're talking about foundational or seismic romantic comedies that did something different, that flipped the script a little bit. Diane Keaton won her only Oscar for Annie Hall. Arguably, she should have a second one, right? And that is for a 2003 film that, while not quite as groundbreaking as Annie Hall, still certainly showed a side of relationships that aren't normally seen. In this case, the age range of the relationship. I am talking about Nancy Meyers' Something's Gotta Give. An extraordinary Keaton performance, a terrific Jack Nicholson performance, one of the best romantic comedies of, as Tom said, of the 21st century, but a very different energy. Everybody is firing on all cylinders in this movie, from Keaton and Nicholson down to Keanu Reeves. Truly just a breath of fresh air every time you watch it. The Diane Keaton crying sequence is so funny. The sweater cutting, Nicholson having the heart attack. It's all just so funny, and very much sort of, if Annie Hall is the midlife crisis of the me generation, then Something's Gotta Give is the it's never too late of that generation. It's just such a sharp script, such a fun movie. And again, I mean, how often the Oscars ignore comedies. Keaton gets an Oscar nomination for this film. She loses to Charlize Theron in Monster. She was never going to beat Charlize Theron in Monster. But an extraordinary performance, great film. And also, there's no Nancy Meyers in the registry. That should change. And Something's Gotta Give is easily the one that should go in. So Something's Gotta Give is my selection for the National Film Registry.
Next week,
Ben Hosley returns to the show to talk about Dog Star Man.
the way that our brains work is we try to like see patterns and we try to organize information. And I think what's really interesting about this thesis statement, the I, right? Like I love that idea of this like omniscient kind of entity.
You're Missing Out is a production of Neon Night Media. It's hosted by Mike Natali and Tom Lorenzo. The show is produced by Kaya Lampar and edited by Mike Natali and Kaya Lampar. More information about our hosts and guests are in the show notes. Thank you to Amanda Rush for our social media, and all of you for checking us out.
If you're listening right now or want to take the show on the go, every episode is available as an audio podcast. Follow You're Missing Out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please leave a review and a rating. It helps folks find the show.
Want to watch the show or watch some of the films along with us? Great, that's why we're doing this. Don't leave us alone out here. Check out our YouTube channel. We've got video versions of every episode, uploads of some of the National Film Registry titles we're discussing, commentary tracks, and live streams. And once a month, I'll be uploading some content that's exclusive to the YouTube channel. So be sure to click subscribe and hit that little bell to be notified as soon as new stuff goes up. Because, let's be fucking real, I ain't sticking to a goddamn schedule.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time.
And you'll see us next time. Because we don't watch you, you're watching us.